that?
Okay, this is a Prairie Mills Windmill, is what we call it. It was built by H. Immiga. He was an immigrant from Germany. He started in 1872 and completed in 1873. They started grinding grain in the fall of '73. The first load of all things went to Carthage, Illinois. And from that point on, what they did was primarily grind corn for wheat. They ground corn for buckwheat flour, and also sometimes they chip corn for feed for the chickens and the cattle and the hogs.
They're saying we're just a little bit too quiet. Could that's okay. We're gonna get a little closer and we will get a little louder. I'm sorry about that. We're outside, that's why. Yep.
Yeah, we are outside, that's for sure. And sound doesn't travel real well.
That's right.
But this golden windmill is sitting on 32 acres of land. Mr. Imgo bought when he first came out here, and it was a swamp, just like was in Germany. It took farmers around here with help 35 wagon loads of gravel hauled from a creek 7 miles away in order to level this off. He then bought 8 3 by 3 by 3 foot chunks of limestone from Quincy, Illinois, and they form the basis and the foundation of the windmill.
And for those who missed it there, 1873. Finished in 1873
is when it was completed. Yes.
All right. All right. Well, we're gonna
go inside right now. We get inside, and that's where the whole thing starts. It's where the grain came in, and it had to be ground down into flour for the ladies of the world to try and bake bread, corn, biscuits, and cookies.
That's right. Okay, we're going to follow you, Kay. I'm going to just want to pan around and show you the beautiful property here. The Golden Windmill is staffed only by volunteers. They put on an amazing Golden Windmill Follies every year that is sponsored by Arts Quincy. So hopefully that will happen this year, and it's their biggest fundraiser of the year.
It's our biggest fundraiser. This year we had to cancel, of course, because of the wonderful
virus, sure.
Kind of went by the wayside.
What time of year is that normally? Spring?
It's usually in the month of March.
March.
First part of April. Just try to stay ahead of Easter.
Okay, so look for it right before Easter next year. Since that is their biggest fundraiser, guys, do remember that you can make donations to support the preservation of the windmill, and they could sure use it this year since the fundraiser was canceled.
Okay, as we come inside, this is where action started, obviously. What would occur, farmers would bring their wagons in. Everything was handled in bags, nothing in bulk. Farmers would bring the wagons, they'd bring their wheat, the buckwheat, and their corn in. It was unloaded there. It was brought in to this part when the wind was blowing.
Hold on, let's go check. It was brought in this door back here?
Yes. That's the original scale that Mr. Hemgo installed when he built this.
Okay. Some really cool artifacts here. This scale here. So they're coming in with their wagon in the back door, and then
come in the north door. When the wind was blowing, now the wind had to be blowing at least 15 miles per hour. If it wasn't blowing that fast, then we had no power, because the only source of power was wind. And once it was going, what they would do is bring the grain in here in the bag. They would chain it on. The guy would reach over and pull this. That would start the sack hoist, taking the grain up. Now, it's not modern like we would think. It goes zip. It took it about 5 minutes to get up to the 3rd floor. Once he heard the loud bang of that door up there, he reached over and stopped the sack hoist. The fellow on the 3rd floor unchained it, set the chain right back down. He did another one, and up it went.
Wow.
So that's how they got the grain up to the 3rd floor. It had to be dumped into the bins, and then it came down into the stones and was ground into flour. Now, a lot of people are unfamiliar with buckwheat. We had 2 kinds of buckwheat. This one, monkey buckwheat, and you can see it was sold 5-pound bags by Mr. Enga. The other one is honeysuckle buckwheat. And a number of people have never seen buckwheat. This is original seed of buckwheat. It's dark, it's very oily, and so when Mr. Emiga was grinding white wheat, switched over to buckwheat, he had an unsaleable product. So he bought a third set of stones from Cincinnati, Ohio, and shipped them in here, and we will see them on the next floor up. But the wheat was high quality here from the grain. Mr. Emiga won many prizes at St. Louis World's Fair and other fairs because of the quality of his grain.
And we
What
mentioned
happens, the grain was ground up above, it came and dropped down through a hole in the floor. I know it's kind of crude, but it dropped down through a hole in the floor, would come down here through the chute into a big barrel. Then they would take a sieve and sift it out and put it in various bags, either 5-pound bags or 25 pounds or 50-pound bags, one or the other. And it was shipped throughout this area and overseas.
And for those of you who may have missed it off the beginning, it is a German-oriented windmill style, as opposed to Dutch, which is maybe a little more well-known, but similar in construction and use, of course.
Very, very simple.
Sure.
Now, okay, this floor, this is about it on this floor. We go up to the.
Do you want to do any of the pieces in here?
Any what?
Do you want to highlight any of the pieces in that room?
Not particularly.
Okay, we're going to go on upstairs then.
That was a store area, strictly a store area.
Gotcha.
They stored everything in bags, and when they got it full, they had to store it in the upper levels. So the guys had to be pretty heavy, strong. A bag of wheat weighs 120 pounds, 2 pounds or 2 bushels, and corn weighed around 112 pounds. So they had to be horses to work with this.
Sure. I'll follow you up. And there are a lot of cool artifacts here, guys. So when you get to visit yourself, you can spend some time looking at some of the historic items they have here in the windmill. Oh, wow.
This is one set of stones, second set of stones. They were identical match. They were purchased by Mr. Emiga when he came back in 1873 in New Orleans, and he had them shipped up to Quincy, Illinois. When he had to have them, he built a special ox cart pulled by 10 oxen. It was a full week for them to go to Quincy, load these 2 sets of stones, and come back to Golden. They could not use a regular constor wagon because this mass, which weighs over 5,000 pounds, and this one 5,000 pounds, if you put that in a Conestoga wagon, it would run the wheels and the axles. It was just too much weight in a constrained area. This is kind of how it works. We have a bed stone on the bottom that doesn't turn, the runner stone on top. As the grain is in the chute, it drops down into the shoe. The shoe, as the axle is turning, sounds just like that. The grain drops out of here, down below, it hits a fan, goes out underneath the stones, and that's where it's ground into flour. Each time the stone comes around, there was a sweep installed on the side of the runner stone. It would gather the flour and drop it through the hole and go down to the first floor.
Wow. I'm going to come over here and show you this stone up close. It's humongous.
This one is the one they got from Cincinnati. It weighs 6,000 pounds. It's 1,000 pounds heavier than these other 2. It's a different type of stone. As you notice, it's got a band around it and everything. These 2 here do not have that band. They're just solid stone, is what they are. And it's a volcanic type of stone that was crushed during the Ice Age, and this is what they think makes it good. Once a year, these stones had to be lifted up and a hammer and chisel taken to them and sharpen them so that they would grind the grain and not just crush the grain.
Hmm.
There's a difference between grinding and crushing.
And you can see that chisel mark here, the shape of it, and the big, I'm guessing, iron surround.
All of this material in here is still, nearly all of it was made by Mr. Elliott, and it's still here.
That's awesome.
Now we go to the third floor.
After you. And if you guys have any questions as we're going, do ask. We will do our best. Get you kind of an overhead view of the grinding stones here. There's the one, and the other, and then the one over here. All right, third floor. The heavy lifting up here.
Yeah, the heavy lifting, we've kind of built this as a bit of a box so that you would have an idea of what was up here. And they could dump at least 5 bushel of grain or 6 bushel in here and start with the grinding. These 3 columns, I like to point out because there are 3 geometric dimensions. Octagon and round, and right at the very top is square. And you can see there's plenty of steel supporting them all. These are original stuff done by Mr. Emmett. When you started the grinding, what they would have to do, one workman would have to climb to that beam way up there, walk across the beam, and then he would have to take a 4x4, push the stone nut into the giant spur wheel, put the 4x4 behind it. Now, we would do that same thing, only we didn't have anybody quite courageous enough to walk that beam, so we had to install a ladder up there to get somebody to go do it. But this is what the stone nut is coming into the giant spur wheel, and that makes everything start working. Wow. The thing of it is, it wasn't synchro mesh. Everything had to stop. Then you pushed it over. Then you started it all again. And to start it, the workman had to go outside and run to get the sails started again. They didn't just automatically start. So,
I'm going to kind of shoot up here. How many people would it take to run the mill for a day?
We think that it took approximately 10 people to keep it really running.
Right.
But the stone nuts on top, the giant spur wheel, all of this stuff is originally made by Mr. Emmett. And it was made through the winter of 1872 and the spring of 1873. But he brought workmen with him from Germany, and that's why they could build it so darn fast. They already had the plans, they knew how to do it.
Wow.
This explains the sack hoist, which is really a simple type of beam. We have an axle with a friction wheel on the outside. On top of the giant spur wheel, there's friction material. So when you wanted the lift to work, the sack hoist to work, all I did was move this, that let this go up, this comes down, and it started rotating, and it would pull the bag all the way up. And when the bag got up here, I'm going to
back up a little bit. Woo! Caught my shoe there. Sorry.
When the bag got up here, of course, it had to come through this door, through that door, and the guy down below, he could easily hear that. When that happened, he would reach over and stop it. They would unchain it, set the chain down, start it all over again real quick. Now, we had 9 engineers from Caterpillar here one time, and they were fascinated by the increase of speed. What happens is the brake wheel, which is attached to the sails outside, has got approximately 132 teeth. The wallower has only got 54 teeth. And so when the outside was turning 16 RPM, it graduated this here, which is hooked to the giant spur wheel. The giant spur wheel is 12 foot in diameter, and it has over 340 teeth. Then that turned the stone nut, which is only 2 foot in diameter. So they calculated that when 16 RPM upstairs. The stone was probably turning around 30 to 32 RPM. And that's, they say it's unbelievable, the genius in figuring out that. Another thing that we thought was genius was this. Through the wintertime, Mr. Emga and his workmen had to make approximately 600 of these. These are hard maple. You can almost take this and use it as a hammer to drive a nail. It's that hard. But those are the teeth that are installed. This was one of the original that we took out of the wallower. They've never broken one or had to replace any. That's how long and how good that hard maple hung on.
So that's 150 years old or so.
It sure is.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's something. Okay, the last thing I'm going to show you is how we have to adjust for the wind. When the wind is blowing and we want to grind, what we have to do, we have to turn the cap up on top. And in order to turn the cap, what we do, the tail pole is hooked to the capstan's wheel. The capstan's wheel has a log chain that runs across here to an anchor. And that anchor, you hook the anchor on, depending on which way the wind is blowing and how you want to turn the cap. You can put it on here, start turning the wheel, and it will rotate it around. Now, it's really hard to do because the cap sits on this dead curve. That's wood on wood. We know that this up here weighs approximately 45,000 pounds. So you've got 45,000 pounds sitting on a piece of wood and you're trying to turn it with this 8-foot capstan wheel down here. It took some doing. That's all there was to it.
So that's to rotate the actual sails around the outside of the building.
That is correct.
Holy
you have
smokes.
to face the wind. Whenever you got to grinding, you had to face the wind. So you didn't know which direction the wind was coming. And so you would have to change the cap around. One of the things that we found out is we had an English man try to help us figure out how to do this. One of the things he told us to never do is do not use hog lard up here as a lubricant because it will attract the mice. Well, we found out that he wasn't near as smart as he thought he was because the mice were all down below. They just ate where the grain was. They didn't climb 93 feet up in the air to try to get a little nibble on some hog lard. And hog lard is the best thing in the world. Our man-made products, all oils and greases and everything we've tried just don't work. They stick. If you don't use them each and every day and apply more, they stick. Hog lard doesn't break down. It just stays there and keeps the surfaces lubricated.
That's amazing.
That's a good plan for us. Now, outside, that's the last part.
I'll show you this
shot of the giant spur wheel ore right here, and you can see all of this mechanism.
Oh yeah,
was built by Mr. Amiga, and it is in perfect balance. You just can't imagine it. After all these years, when that turns, you don't hardly hear a thing. It's so balanced.
That's amazing. We'll take some pictures, guys, and put them up on Arts Quincy's website too when we're done with the tour. Oh, what a pretty day for this.
Well, this is the tail pole, the capstan's wheel, the winding chain, and an anchor. And
Just
so
the anchor.
whenever we want to move things, we have to use this, obviously. And we try to get it so that when you get to the corners, the axle is pulled clear back. So you have to gear it about right to do it. Otherwise, you screw the corners up all the time.
So it would still move if you wanted to move it.
Oh heavens, yes. Yeah, it's still going.
And he was saying that the sails are off right now. Some of the wood needs repaired, but it will run. It's still an operational windmill if it were sails were put back on the scaffolding for them.
Yes. We are going to, we're hoping in the next 30 days all the sails will be replaced and we will be trying to renovate. We've got it in, we've got all the material bought. We just have to get the workmen. You know, we do everything with volunteers. We don't pay many people to do things.
And the windmill is looking for volunteers. So if you live out in Camp Point or Golden or even in Quincy and you'd like to really help with preserving a very, very neat site, I'll put it in the comments, but we can get you in touch with the Golden Windmill. They would love, I'm sure, the volunteers, the labor, even people to do tours. Maybe if you're a retired person out here who wants to help with tours, certainly be appreciated.
Go around here to the sail. The sails are 8 foot wide and it's 71 foot from tip to tip. And what's amazing is we cheated. We used metal rather than wood, but it's a 5-inch square and it goes to a 12-inch square in the middle, then it has to smooth back down to a 5-inch square on the very top end. And this is the side that we use for sails because we can turn the shutters. When shutters are on here, we can turn them down so that we can get more power and more speed. The leading edge, however, provides almost 70% of the total amount of power and speed through the sails. We've had to replace a lot of this, and we had a lot of help from a fellow in Quincy by the name of Bill Avercamp.
Oh.
Mr. Avercamp come out here when we were having rotting problems with our big timbers. He formed steel jackets and built it together. He did a great job at it. He really enjoyed working with this project. And he was, we are eternally grateful for the help that he gave us. That is the windmill. Now we have to keep track of this because 16 RPM is the most it can turn. When we're turning it, we almost have to forbid people to be out here because we've had people step in front of these sails. Young kids keep wanting to grab a hold of this and ride it.
Oh no.
They don't realize how far it goes or how fast it's going. I say it's going 16 RPM. But when it's running 16 RPM, that means that every 4 seconds, this makes 360 degrees.
Oh, wow.
So the speed this is traveling out here, miles per hour, is amazing how fast it's really going.
Sure.
And we've had 3 people get hit with it.
Oh,
Because
no.
they're looking up and not paying attention to where it is.
Pretty amazing. Anybody have any questions while we're here? How can people donate?
Well, Golden Historical Society, I don't know what our box number is at Golden.
That's all right.
Illinois.
We'll put it in the comments. Jenna's watching; she could put it in the comments for us. Accepting donations will help keep this amazing spot. I'm gonna kind of pan around and just show you the beautiful spot we're in.
32 acres that he bought, and right over here where FS is located, that actually was an 8-acre lake. That's how wet this ground really was.
Wow.
At the time.
8 acres. That's quite a big lake.
Well, it's a big lake because the Wabash Railroad went through there, and that's where they would stop and pick up water for their steam engines.
Wow.
They run between Chilcook and Meridosha. And,
sure.
That's all the local kids, of course, use it as a swimming pool. So.
Sure. Well, we want to thank Kay for taking us through. If you guys have any more questions, stick them in the comments and we'll see what we can do. I'm also going to take some pictures while we're here and for future Arts Quincy magazines and things. But can't thank you enough. Oh, wait, we got how many days a year could the windmill run considering it needed to be windy? How often did the lack of wind stymie it?
Normally, it did not run very often in the summertime.
Right.
Very, very seldom in the summer. And it would start a lot of times in the fall. Of course, that's when grain would be coming in too. But it run in the wintertime when it was running and the wind was blowing good and steady. They run 24 hours a day. 24 hours a day at that time. Now, after 1903, Mr. Ramaga thought steam power would be a lot better and more reliable source. So he went across the road and he built himself a big, nice elevator with a steam. However, local ladies didn't like their wheat flour ground by steam power. They wanted it ground by stone power. So this still run until 1921. 1921, the sails blew off through a tornado, and it concentrated cereal brought it down, and it stopped.
Gotcha. You can kind of feel a nice breeze up here right now. Is this enough to run it? Close.
No.
Not yet. No. Okay.
This is probably 8 to 10,
8 to 10.
most.
Yeah.
It has to be a sustained breeze.
Sure.
Now, we've got a thing over there. Used to tell us all the time exactly what it was doing. You see, it's not hardly turning right now.
Sure.
Even though we feel a little breeze.
Yep, just a little. I don't know if you can see that on the video, but there's a little wind gauge.
There
it goes. She found it. Well, we can't thank you enough, guys. If you have any more questions, stick them in the comments. We'll see what we can do. I'll take some pictures and we'll say goodbye. Thank you for the amazing tour of this great site. It is only a quick little drive from Quincy, so recommend when everything gets back up and running to. It's a really nice little spot to come visit. We thank you.
Well, we would sure like to have it, obviously.
Thanks, everybody. Bye for now.